Welcome to the Empowered Investor Podcast, brought to you by the advisory team at Toulette Matthews and Associates. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the number of voices telling you how to plan or invest for your future? We're here to help you cut through the noise, bringing clarity to your investment decisions and helping you build lasting financial peace of mind. Learn more and subscribe today at tma-invest.com. Welcome to the Empowered Investor. My name is Keith Matthews, and I'm joined by my co-host, Marcelo Taboada. Marcelo, how are you today?
Keith, I'm doing good. I'm excited about today's show. It's a nice show that complements the one we did last week.
Yeah, last week we did one on the landscape of Canadian retirement, and it was very well received by listeners.
Yeah.
Today's show is going to be on the 4 major global trends in wealth management.
Yeah.
We've identified 4 trends that I think are interesting for us to review, but more importantly, the implications for our listeners and the implications for Canadian investors at large.
Yeah.
So the 4 trends are as follows. Trend number 1, the rise of index funds globally. Trend 2, the rise of independent firms. Mm-hmm. Trend 3, the rise of retirement planning. Mm-hmm. And trend 4, the rise of investor protection and/or investor transparency. All right. So, Marcel, why are we having a discussion on major trends? Like, what's important about this?
Well, I think it's important because, as Canadians are navigating their finances and, people in the world, the trends they have an impact in how people make decisions about money. And if you're aware of these things, it leads to making better decisions, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Having more awareness on what are the major trends, what are the major movements within an industry that serves you, I think is empowering. It allows the investor to make better decisions about who they hire, what kind of services they want to use, and how they actually bring wealth management into their lives.
Yeah, and it leads to better outcomes overall.
100%. All right, let's jump right into it. The very first trend that we've seen that we want to talk about is
the rise of the index funds. So index funds in the United States 25 years ago, for every dollar that went into an index fund, $5 went to an actively managed portfolio where you're paying a manager to beat the market, right? We're not going to get into that, but essentially that trend is completely different now. Now more money is going into index fund than it is to active funds. So if you look at the distribution right now in the United States, it's 60% of all money managed is parked in an index fund.
In any type of index fund. Now, that could be an index fund that tracks the S&P 500. It could be an index fund that tracks international securities.
Correct.
It could be something that tracks the bond market. Regardless,
Exactly.
It's not actively managed strategies.
Correct. It's taking over now, and it is happening globally as well.
So when you say globally, we know that it's happening in Europe. We know that it's happening in Asia. There is one country where index money management hasn't taken over active money management. What country is that?
Canada.
All right, let's talk about why it's not happening and then the good news as to what investors can do.
Yes. So I think the biggest reason why this is happening in Canada is because you have 5 major financial institutions that control the manufacturing and distribution of actively managed funds. So when the average Canadian walks into a retail branch, their money is invested into a mutual fund that probably is actively managed and has higher fees.
It's the lack of independence and it's the control by manufacturers.
Correct.
Which essentially is pushing, and they're sort of creating a moat, and they want to keep all their fees high and their profits high. So Marcelo, tell us a little bit about the management fees that we find around the world.
Yeah, so this is the other imbalance that we're seeing in Canada is if you look at, for example, the global average for management expense ratios of mutual funds, it is about 1.3 globally. In the US is 0.4. In Canada is 2% to 2.25%. So we have significantly higher fees than the rest of the world.
Yeah, and part of that might be advice that's embedded in that.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, Canada is known for a high fee world, and that comes with active management, and that
Correct.
comes primarily because the large financial institutions, whether it's insurance companies or banks, are protecting their profit margins by pushing their high fee strategies.
Correct.
And so this is one of the reasons why index management hasn't accelerated quite as fast fast as the rest of the world. Now, that said, the tide is turning. So for Canadians, I think the optimistic thing or the positive thing now is Canadians are way more aware that index funds are available. There are way more independent firms now using index funds. We've been using index funds for 25 to 30 years. Now, there's way more firms doing this, which is fantastic. And the awareness level amongst individual investors is very high. Way higher.
It's way higher. And I mean, the implications for Canadians are if you're in a high fee product that underperforms and it's kind of all over the place with no advice, it can mean delayed retirement days for people because you're paying higher fees. It's more of a drag on your plan and your investments. And it also reduces retirement lifestyle spending when you're retired. More fees, less money in your pocket.
Well put. I used to remember trying to explain what's the impact. And most people would say, well, it's a little bit more in fees. I don't mind. But the reality of it is you should mind. You should mind because 100%. It does affect everything you've just mentioned.
Investing is probably the only industry where you pay a lot of money and people don't get upset that they're not getting the results they need to be getting. Because if you think about any other industry, if I'm paying a lawyer and I'm not getting any value, I'm raising my voice for sure.
Many other scenarios also suggest that when you pay higher for a suit, you're going to have a higher quality, potentially a higher quality suit. And people don't necessarily realize when you pay higher fees, you don't necessarily get a better outcome.
Yeah.
So what's happening, though, I think from this major trend is the world is recognizing the power of the index funds.
Yeah.
And this is not a 20-year story. This is a 50 to 60-year story that is accelerating big time. That acceleration is coming to Canada as well.
Yeah, and the evidence is a combination of things. You have academic evidence. You have institutions that publish research every year that shows that indexing is a much better approach to investing. And you have even houses like Morningstar publishing reports all the time. So the awareness is just way higher now.
Yeah. Okay. So the good news for investors is it's here in Canada, it's growing around the world, and they should, if they're looking at their investment portfolios or they're looking at who they should choose, they should make sure they understand if this is a viable option, if it makes sense for them, and they need to explore that more.
100%.
Okay. So let's go to trend number 2, the rise of independent firms.
Yeah, so what we're seeing here is something similar to the rise of the index fund. So if we look at 25 years ago, most money in the United States was managed in large institutions. So think about the Goldman Sachs, the Merrill Lynch, the Lehman Brothers. Some of those collapsed in 2008, but think about the big U.S. banks, right? In Canada, the equivalence would be the big 5 banks. Right now in the United States, more money is being managed by registered investment advisors, which are independent firms that are client-centric instead of product-centric, and they offer many different services. Like they could offer tax planning, they could offer tax services, they could offer financial planning and things like this. So that's another trend that we're seeing. And right now, like I said, most money in the United States is managed by registered independent advisors.
Yeah, I was actually, when I looked at this research, I was surprised to see these numbers.
Yes.
Because what we're looking at to our listeners is a chart which essentially shows that 20 years ago, 5 times as much money was being managed by large wirehouses, large brokerage firms, versus independent RIAs. Now, fast forward to 2024, there's approximately $10 trillion managed by RIA firms and $8 trillion managed by the large wirehouses. Yeah. So the independent has overtaken the wirehouse in the United States. And we're seeing this in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah.
In Australia, in Great Britain, in other parts of Europe, these trends of independent advisors are pushing forward. We're now starting to see it in Canada. It's a very interesting concept, the RIA, Registered Investment Advisory Firm. And that in the United States is a group that is allowed to advise clients, produce strategies, best interest strategies for clients. Mm-hmm. They are not allowed to receive commissions. And they're not building products, which then get resold by other institutions.
They're client-centric instead of product-centric.
Correct.
It's a very simple proposition.
We are the equivalent of an RIA firm in Canada.
Correct.
We're licensed as a PM firm. The major distinction for the independent firm is they're not building product.
That's it.
And as soon as you build product, you're always trying to find ways to market product, even if it may not be the best product.
Correct.
So the rise of independence, I'm telling you that we see this more from individuals that we speak to, where they're coming in and they're saying, I don't want to work with a firm that has an agenda that's not my agenda, that's not working in my best interest.
Correct.
So what are some of the research there's been some recent investigative reports by CBC as well as the OSC. Let's talk a little bit about that, because that ties into Canadians becoming aware of some of the conflicts that are embedded in a sales culture.
CBC runs this program called Marketplace, where they go with hidden cameras to explore and do investigations on different products and service providers. And they did one with the major banks. And they realized in camera that a lot of people were giving false advice around fees, products, advice such as there was a lady that walks in with an inheritance. Obviously, these are mystery shoppers, right? So they walk in with an inheritance and they say something like, hey, should I pay out my credit card or invest my money? And the banker goes, you should invest the money. Don't worry about the credit card debt, which is ludicrous, right? Like you're leaving a debt that charges 21% and you're going to get 5, 6, 7% at best in an investment. They found very problematic things, and from things such as disclosing fees, like they say things like, oh, don't worry about the fees. They take care of themselves, things like that. So it shed a lot of light into the practices of the banks and how, look, I used to work at a bank, so I know how it is. You find very good people, but you're in an environment where the incentives are set up for you to sell products, not to act in the client's best interest. And, a lot of people like myself end up leaving and becoming great advisors. So it's not that we're saying bad people are working in those places. It's the incentive structure that is bad.
Well, what they've highlighted is a sales culture.
Correct. It's a sales culture.
And when you get to independent firms that have to operate with more of a fiduciary responsibility,
it's different.
It changes the culture immediately.
Correct.
And Canadians are becoming more aware that this actually matters.
They are.
Within our industry, a lot of people have pointed to the CBC Marketplace report. It really shed light that there's a major sales culture with major incentives, and these incentives do not always produce the best results for clients.
No.
So with that investigative report, there was another one that came through, and this to me is actually the more interesting one, and that was done by the Ontario Securities Commission. They saw the report and they said, we're going to go do our own report. And so they surveyed financial advisors or mutual fund representatives at the branch level. And what was their major finding?
So the major finding was that 25% of them believe that they're not working in the client's best interest, essentially.
Yeah, so this report is entitled Sales Culture Concerns at 5 of Canada's bank-affiliated dealers. And on the executive summary, the number one point that they've brought out was this point that you've mentioned, which is a quarter don't feel that they're working in their best interest, the best interest of the client. They found about 20 other, they did a lot of different work, but this was really the big one that they walked away with. And so what does all this mean for advice?
Well, it means that now that we know all these things, right, and we're seeing a trend, the good thing is that it means that people have better choices now. And there is, like Canada, we're seeing a rise of independent firms like ours, like you're seeing that more and more in the market. And that leads to better outcomes in the end, because I think Canadians 20 years ago, maybe they didn't have that many choices outside of a bank.
Those are all very valid points, Marcelo. Those are great points, in fact. To me, what a lot of this also does is it allows Canadians to become way more aware.
Yeah.
We've always been aware. Look, you were aware when you made a decision to leave the large
course.
bank and to come into the space that is here, that's client-driven. I was aware many, many years ago when I left institutional bond trading and I went to my former firm, PWO Capital. It was based on a world which was transparent, client-driven, advice, wealth management, and portfolio structure, and not the selling of products. So within the industry, we've become aware of this. But now I think what's happening is more and more Canadians are becoming aware of this.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Yeah.
That's the big one.
Okay, so implications for our clients, the fact that this trend is now existing and more independent advisors and independent firms are available. What are the implications?
Well, there's better choices, lower fees, better client service, better outcomes.
Yep.
Yep.
A lot of the trends we're talking about in today's show are very positive for our listeners and very positive for investors at large.
Yeah. Again, the implication is, to me, is clear. Like if a clients end up in an environment where it's a client-centric environment, where they're getting good advice, an investment approach that works and lowers fees, it leads to better outcomes.
Yeah. Okay, trend number 3, Marcelo.
The rise of retirement planning. So bottom line, Keith, is we have an aging population. people are living longer, and there's way fewer defined benefit plans. So long gone are the days where you would just have an investment advisor that only talks about investments. People now need a proper retirement plan. And that is a trend that we're seeing in the industry. It's a trend we're seeing worldwide, and it has major implications for Canadians, because if you do not plan for your retirement well, it will lead to bad outcomes, and you do not want to be in that situation.
For sure. So we did a show last week where we highlighted the direction of the Canadian demographics in terms of how many people are actually either pre-retirees or retirees. And so 25 years ago, 1 in 7 was a retiree at 65 and over. Now it's 1 in 5, and in 10 years from now, it'll be 1 in 4.
Yes.
If we add pre-retirees to that category in 10 years from now, it's going to be like 1 in 3, 1 in 3.5 is either pre-retired or retired. That is a massive amount of people who need and who want some form of retirement planning.
They need to answer the basic questions. Am I going to be okay? What happens if something happens to me? What happens to my spouse? Like, do I have a proper legacy plan? Is my estate plan in place? Like, these are important questions. It's a rising trend, and people need to get on with it.
Yeah, and the good news is more and more firms, and we see this across the Canadian landscape, more and more firms are offering retirement planning.
Correct.
So I think one of the implications for investors here is if you're reviewing your structure, your financial affairs, and you're not receiving financial projections about your retirement and planning on your retirement, you really should seek more advice.
Absolutely.
Because it's available. A lot of firms are offering it.
Yes.
And I think what you'll see is you'll start to see a distinction within firms that are offering as to what is really thorough planning and what is kind of average planning.
Yes.
And I think Canadians are going to become more aware of this. Individuals will talk to each other. You know, it's just natural for this to happen. So that was trend number 3, Marcelo. Trend number 4, the rise of investor protection in Canada.
Yes.
So the background behind that is a structure called CRM. And these are our regulators, national regulators that regulate mutual fund dealers, security dealers, and portfolio management firms. Mm-hmm. They came up with a series of reforms. Yeah. And they had 3 major reforms. But the first 2 are in history. They happened in the past. And the third one we'll spend a bit more time on is coming next year.
Yes.
Let's start with the first 2 and then share with our listeners what the third one is.
Right. So the client relationship model, like you mentioned, it aims to shed light in transparency, fee disclosure, and client protection. The 3 stages were as follows. So in the CRM1 stage was pre-2014, and that was basic disclosure at onboarding. They would disclose fees and very basic information, nothing crazy. It wasn't kept ongoing after that. So CRM2 tried to change that. And now from 2014 to 2017, they had the new stage was annual performance reports had to be given to the client every year, and annual compensation on investment management fees had to be reported to the client in dollar terms instead of percentage.
Investment management, it was advice fees.
Correct.
Yeah.
Advice fees, not if you had a relationship with an advisor that had 2 layers of fees of investment management and 1 management expense ratio of whatever product, that wasn't disclosed. So there was just 1 element disclosed. Now, CRM3, total cost reporting on everything. So Canadians will for the first time see everything of all they're paying and the services they're receiving.
Well, so what they're going to get is they're going to get a statement, like you say, with total cost. So if you're paying an advisor and your advisor is using an ETF,
correct,
the ETF charge will also be noted.
Correct. Or a mutual fund.
Or a mutual fund. And the amount of money, dollars, that are associated with the cost of that strategy.
Yeah.
Annual dollars.
Yes.
It also means that if you're working at a bank, that historically you may not have had an advisor, but they're using a mutual fund that has
an MER
that
with
just has an MER of 1.9%.
Yeah.
You're now going to be shown 1.9%.
Yeah. In dollar terms.
In dollar terms.
Yeah.
What the regulators are trying to do is create an environment. I think it's actually reasonably smart. It's a lot of work for firms to do. But they're trying to create an environment where consumers can make proper choices.
Yes.
Educated choices. So now a consumer can understand what services are being provided. I'm
Correct.
getting planning, I'm getting portfolio, I get a chance to call, somebody helps me with my wills. On occasion, this service, that service gets done. What they could never quite figure out was how much were they paying for all the services. So now they're actually, for the first time, going to get all of the, what do I get? What do I pay? And they'll be able to make better choices and better decisions. And that's the issue. And I think that's a pretty major amount of transparency that's going to come at Canadians very quickly.
Correct.
and empower them to help them make better decisions.
100%.
So Marcelo, let's wrap up.
Yep.
Today's show, we've got there's more trends going on in the investment industry.
Yeah.
There's trends that, that are out there that we don't necessarily feel are trends that you need to be aware of to really improve your situation. We thought we'd choose 4 really solid trends.
Yes.
What's your takeaway here? What's your final words of advice?
My takeaway is one of optimism. I think all these 4 trends are positive and it will lead to better outcomes for Canadians. And I think if I define a better outcome by just having a better approach, peace of mind, and having a happy retirement where you can have the best life that you can have.
Wow. We should just wrap the show up right there. That's fantastic. Thank you. That's very well put. The only thing I would add is you're right. We're optimistic. These are great trends. This is empowering. This provides Canadians with better opportunities to make decisions. Better outcomes to me mean, less stress, better returns. Yeah. Better returns, better advice. Mm-hmm. And if all of that can get them to their goals faster in a smoother environment, better for everybody. So I think it's a 100%. Wonderful time to be an investor right now.
Yes.
So with that, Marcelo, thank you so much. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope you find this information informative, and we look forward to the next show.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Empowered Investor Podcast, brought to you by Toulette Matthews and Associates. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe and share it with somebody who wants to invest with clarity and confidence. To learn more about how we help investors build lasting financial peace of mind, visit us at tma-invest.com. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and stay on track to your financial goals. Investment and investing strategies should be evaluated based on your own objectives. Listeners of this podcast should use their best judgment and consult a financial expert prior to making any investment decisions based on the information found in this podcast.